break. So nightly news once again will be coming your way at 6:30 on Cozy TV. Stay right here on NBC 10 for live coverage of this breaking news situation. Once again at 6:30, we are watching an active shooter situation unfolding. Live pictures on the right side of your screen from Skyforce 10. 6 police officers in Philadelphia's Nicetown, Tioga section have been shot. Philadelphia police say their injuries are not life-threatening. Additional officers are dealing with some other injuries that don't involve gunshots. Related to this active shooter situation, a gunman still holed up, as at last report, inside a home on a street in this neighborhood.
And there's a nearby daycare that is remaining open beyond the normal hours because of this. We also know Temple University, the health sciences campus, is on lockdown. All of this apparently starting as a narcotics investigation. Now it remains 2 hours later, still a very active shooter situation. We heard radio calls of panicked residents calling in, calls of fear, people clearly in tears, desperate for answers, wanting to know what's going on in their community. We saw numerous residents and business owners standing out on the corner, and police were trying to move them further and further back into what they thought would be a safe area for them. But a lot of concern in this neighborhood, and still a neighborhood under siege and at a standstill, hoping that there's a resolution. Everyone waiting to hear that this shooter is in custody and that everyone is safe. The good news, what we are hearing, is that the officers who were injured, they are non-life-threatening injuries, even though we heard that one was shot in the head. Fortunately, it appears that all of those are non-life-threatening, and hopefully that continues to be the case, but it is still an active situation.
This has been going on, as we said, for 2 hours now. This part of North Philadelphia is just paralyzed. We want to show you some video from when this all began. As we understand again from our Harry Hairston, this began with police officers attempting to serve a warrant in a narcotics investigation. We're going to show you some earlier, again, this is from earlier. Jackie, you and I were on the air as we saw this transpiring on the left side of your screen.
Yes, you can see where we have it focused right there. We see an individual being rushed to the car, and then we heard that one suspect was in custody. But quickly they rushed them from that curb, from that sidewalk into that vehicle. And then, as you're seeing here, we quickly saw that police car take off, and then they got back in position. The other officers who were out there on the street. But take a look right here, video from earlier, just how many police cars are out there. We haven't seen that shot in a while. And here you see that police car taking off with who we believe was one of the suspects they were able to take into custody. But another suspect still inside that home.
All right, we're going to show this to you one more time. This is the wider view of that person being taken down the sidewalk, running with those officers, and placed into a vehicle. Now, from this vantage point, it's difficult to discern who that person is. Civilian, officer. I can't see. If our newsroom can shed light on that, they will let us know, of course. There goes the vehicle. They race off.
We know someone here was taken away. We do know also, in addition, there was a suspect in custody. Whether this was the same individual, we don't know. But just to give you an idea of how much activity was taking place in this area. Our producer was just telling something to me. I couldn't hear it because I was
Keith Jones
speaking.
has some new information in the newsroom. Keith?
That's right. Sources tell NBC 10 that at least one officer is trapped inside the house in question. Police officers are surrounded it. At least one police officer is trapped, according to sources, inside this home. Of course, Skyforce 10 has had to pull away, but we've got reporters on that scene. There is one shooter inside. We know that, according to police, and at least one police officer is trapped, according to our sources. As soon as we know more about that, Jim, Jacqueline, we'll get back to you.
So that's brand new information we're reporting, Keith, about an officer trapped inside the same building where this shooter is. I can only imagine what that officer is going through. This has been going on for 2 hours now.
And all of the officers outside. And we were talking to former FBI agent J.J. Claver a short time ago, and talking about how important negotiation is at a time like this, if they're even able to negotiate with this individual. Likely not if shots were still being fired. He said often they can get a cell phone into a home and they can attempt to negotiate in that manner. But this is a very hostile situation with shots still being fired. And as we're hearing, one officer trapped inside that home. So a tense situation inside and outside in the Nicetown Tioga neighborhood.
Let's go down to NBC 10's Aaron Baskerville, who's reporting there live at the scene with that yellow crime tape behind you there. Aaron, what's the latest from your vantage point?
So if I can say it's all quiet, it's been relatively quiet for the last 20 minutes or so. I can say that because you were live on TV and we heard those volleys of shots about 4 or 5 different times. We heard rapid fire, 7, 8 different shots. Behind me, you can see officers are still here like they have been here for 2 hours or so here. Some still taking that defensive position behind some of the vehicles over here. But it isn't as intense as it was here before. And obviously that's because that guy, at least one of the guys, was shooting, firing shots. They had officers running across the street, ducking for cover on the ground. You had people here, witnesses that are by my side that you can't see right now, screaming, running inside houses. We use chaos a lot, but it was certainly pure chaos out here every single time you hear those volleys of shots. Jason Ryan, my photographer over there, if you can see that awning, that has been a central point out here. We're near Erie and Sydenham. That's where a lot of officers have been coming in and out of that house, maybe using that as a vantage point to get a better look at some of the activity. Up a street from that is Butler. This whole thing went down, as we've been saying, near 15th and Butler. We're obviously hearing this all started as a narcotics, a drug warrant that led to this situation. But right now, I can say it's been fairly quiet. We haven't heard any shots being fired, which is very good news, because for about a span of a half hour, every 5-10 minutes, we would hear some sort of gunfire, 7-8 shots, 7-8 shots, then maybe 1 or 2 shots. And it sent people into panic out here, Jim and Jack.
All right, and as you've been updating us from your scene, we're hearing from Washington, and the president has been briefed on the situation here in Philadelphia and is monitoring developments as we sit here now. This standoff with a gunman holed up inside a house in the Nicetown Tioga section with, now from sources, a police officer trapped inside that building.
Yes, each detail just getting more disturbing as we're hearing it. The good news again, the injuries so far have been non-life threatening, according to the reports that we've received, but that doesn't make this situation any less tense or nerve-wracking, not only for those police officers who were inside that daycare, a daycare that is very close to the scene of this shooting, unsettling for students. Temple University's Health Sciences campus on lockdown. And you always wonder how widespread this is. When this call first came in at 4:30 of shots fired, we immediately responded with our crews. And then we saw from Skyforce 10 the images of how wide this perimeter was, how many police officers had responded. And now hearing that it has gotten to Washington and that President Trump has been briefed on this situation, very telling of the magnitude of this.
Governor Wolf has also tweeted that he's monitoring the situation and praying for the recovery of the officers who were injured in the line of duty, and also for the safety of others who were responding to the incident. So that was from Governor Wolf about 15-20 minutes ago. As we move into past the 2-hour mark of this standoff, the picture you see on the upper left of your screen, that's from Temple University Hospital. That's where some of these officers are being treated. Again, as you just said, Jackie, word is from police that the injuries are not life-threatening, that these officers are going to survive their injuries, but 6 of them have been shot this afternoon. There are other injuries associated with the situation, officers who were hurt but were not shot. They are also at the hospital. We've got 2 hospitals involved treating these officers. One is Temple, that you see the outside of the emergency room there live on your screen. The other is Einstein Medical Center, where you heard from NBC 10's Deanna Durante, who's seen activity there as well, where some of the officers were taken for treatment.
And since it has been quiet for some time in terms of silence from gunpowder, because we've heard so much gunfire over the past 2 hours, now since there's been silence for a considerable amount of time, we can only hope that the suspect who's inside ran out of firepower, and that hopefully there will be a surrender shortly as a result if he doesn't have any more ammunition. But we just don't know. Or possibly this is a time when negotiation is taking place with the suspect inside, and if they were able to communicate with him, and if they are talking with him, trying to get him to surrender. At that point, we don't know, but we know that the manpower is still in place, and we know that 6 officers have been shot in the Nicetown Tioga section of Philadelphia near the area of 15th and Butler.
NBC 10's Brandon Hudson has been near this scene for going on about 2 hours now. He's out there along with Aaron Baskerville, and Brandon's been hearing some of these shots fired, but it's been about 30 minutes or so, Brandon, would you say, since the last shots were heard?
Yeah, I'd say that was probably the last time we heard some gunshots that we could hear from our vantage point. We're at 16th and Erie. We had to move back a little bit on the other side of some police tape. They brought more officers in for crowd control. As you see, again, a lot of people that are coming in, a lot of neighbors that are coming in. And one other thing that we are noticing is people who are coming in, they're getting off work, or they have gotten off work, and they've either been out here for the duration of what's been going on, or they're just now getting here and finding police have shut down this entire part of their street. We did see one lady moments ago who was trying to talk to officers. She lives right by Sydenham and Erie, close to where Aaron Baskerville is. She's been trying to get home. She hasn't been able to get home since she's been off work. So a lot of people, they just want to come home, they want to relax, but they're not able to because this standoff continues. Again, so you're looking at officers, and then I'm not sure if you saw this, but one officer had a bottle of water in her hand. I think our chief meteorologist, Tammy Souza, sent out an email saying that around 6:15 and around the time of this standoff going on, the temperature was in the 80s. The heat index was in the 80s. Of course, when you factor in all the equipment that these police officers have on, they can get dehydrated. So officers have been out here going back and forth to a Chinese restaurant, corner store over here. And as Aaron has said, earlier we focused on a porch that was on the left of where we are, would be on the left of your screen. It's a burgundy looking porch with white pillars. When we first got here, we saw officers there with long guns and in positions to kind of in defensive positions. But since then, we have not seen any of those shooters or any of those officers, whether that's a change in strategy, that remains to be seen. We did see another group of officers go off to another part of 16th Street and have a meeting. And we did hear officers talking about at some point moving this crowd back. We don't know when that will happen. We don't know if they're bringing in more officers, more SWAT, more vehicles. But for the time being, we do see a couple of SEPTA buses, the 5624 and the 56 towards Oak Hotman. Those have stopped. The SEPTA public information officer told me service to those buses has halted for the time being. So if you're on that route, hopefully you found another way to get home. Jim and Jacqueline will send it back to you.
And Brandon, you're right there on the scene. I know earlier you spoke to someone, a resident who was very concerned about a nearby daycare, and we heard that that daycare was staying open longer. Have you seen some parents in that area who were concerned because possibly any of their children were inside that daycare? But I know that individual you spoke to was very concerned about that building.
It's tough to say at this point. A lot of people that we see coming to our area of 16th and Erie are either walking home or they're having to find another way. As you know, police have this entire area on lockdown from where we are, several blocks, 3 or 4 blocks down the street, one direction, 3 and 4 blocks down the street in the other direction. So it's up to a lot of these parents to try to find a way to get to where that daycare is. But we have not seen any parents who we would think have children that are at that daycare at this time.
And the daycare has been asking the parents not to come there. Obviously, they're in a shelter-in-place situation, Brandon. And there you look at live pictures of the firepower that these officers are carrying, along with the bulletproof vests they are wearing, the tactical gear. But I was saying that the daycare is asking parents to stay away for now. They're going to stay open later. They normally close at 6. We presume they're still there with the children. They said the children were safe. Very young ages, all the way up to about 10 years old, I think is what we said. But they said the children are there and safe, and the parents should wait and not come to that location for obvious reasons.
So you can see there all the people who are gathered. This is not a live picture here, but you can see all the people, and I know just as many are out there now, if not more. Brandon said that more people were coming to the scene. That is actually a live image of people gathered out there looking down their street, wanting to know what is happening on their block and when there will be a resolution. But can you imagine coming home to this? So many streets blocked in this area too. You would imagine that people had a difficult time getting to their location, or many possibly aren't near their home right now and they can't get any closer because of the barricades that police have set up for their own safety.
Again, this began with a narcotics investigation, a warrant that the police were attempting to serve, and then the gunfire began and 6 officers were shot. That number kept rising. It was initially a lower number. It's risen to 6, but we are also hearing the good news from the police department that the officers are expected to survive their gunshot wounds. They're being treated at a couple of hospitals in our area, Temple and Einstein Medical Center, and there are some other injuries related to this active shooter situation that don't involve gunshot wounds, and we presume those officers are going to be okay as well.
And earlier we were showing a shot of the house, and you could see windows were blown out. There was a huge screen on the lower level. That screen was blown out from gunfire, and then up above there was a smaller window, and that was blown out as well. So we knew that there were shots fired either from one floor to the other, or there was movement between the first and the second floor. But either way, a lot of gunfire with more than 100 shots fired in that area.
Activity on both levels of that home, and we know we've been reporting that an officer is trapped at this time. We don't know exactly where in that building, but we understand the officer is trapped, and the police presence you see here is attempting to bring this to a peaceful conclusion, and that officer can be safely rescued from that scene. Hundreds of officers descended on this area of Nicetown, Tioga in North Philadelphia, residential neighborhood, as Brandon has been saying. It is paralyzed right now. It is on lockdown, if you will, in several sections of the neighborhood because of this active shooter situation. And people couldn't drive down the streets anyway because of the number of police cars that are there responding to this scene.
And former FBI agent J.J. Claver, who we were speaking with earlier, I asked him, has he ever seen anything like this? We know we had not. Our reporters who are there on the scene, who have covered many crime stories over various markets, had not seen anything like this. And this former FBI agent said he hadn't seen anything like this since the MOVE movement. So just gives you an idea of what impact this is having and how surprising it is, even for those who have done this for a number of years.
As Brandon mentioned, it's been quiet now for over half an hour, which you could take as good news. We don't know what's transpiring specifically, but as recently as about 6:15 tonight, there were still shots being fired from that building, and that has been going on for the past couple of hours. We know one suspect's in custody, but there's a shooter who has been unwilling to give up and has been, in fact, firing on police and firing outside that home. So this situation remains very tense and active right now.
And we would continue to hear from our reporters that shots are still being fired. And of course, when we initially heard that one suspect was taken into custody, your hope naturally is that this is coming to an end and that there will be a ceasefire. Okay, they have one suspect in custody. We were thinking that there was only one suspect. And then we noticed that this presence was still there, and then more shots were heard, and then we heard yes, there was still another suspect inside. And now it continues with a total of 6 officers shot, most of them taken to Temple, another taken to Einstein, one in custody, and another still inside, keeping this community and the country at this point, because this has gone nationwide, on alert and tense.
If you've been looking for NBC Nightly News, that's over on Cozy TV right now, because we've been bringing you continuous live coverage of this active shooter situation. To give you an idea of where we're talking about, this is in the area of 15th and Butler, a couple of miles north of Temple University, about 4 miles from Center City, Philadelphia. And let's go back down to our newsroom, and NBC 10's Keith Jones with some new information for us. Keith?
You know, what we're trying to figure more about is this at least one police officer there inside the house, trapped, is what we're hearing from sources to NBC 10. What you're looking at right now, the right side of your screen, is that armored vehicle, officers on the right side of it, facing gunfire that's been coming from across the street right there. That is where we presume this one officer is trapped in a house. Again, according to sources to NBC 10. 6 police officers have been shot. We've not only seen some of them being transported on video, we've also heard some of the police dispatch, officers there in distress, calling for backup, calling for help just before 5 o'clock today. We're going to get to a little bit of that video in just a moment, but let me set this stage. We've got reporters all over this neighborhood. Temple University has sent out an alert to students to shelter in place. All of those neighbors there have been told to shelter in place. Neighbors have also described to NBC 10 that this was reminded at least one woman of a war zone, that hundreds of shots have been fired. In fact, for more than an hour, to an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half, gunshots were continuing to be heard, not only by witnesses, but even our reporters right there on the ground. And reports are continuing to come in to NBC 10, some of them conflicting. We're working right now. The process here in our newsroom is to figure out with our sources, calling Philadelphia police, using our resources to confirm exactly what's going on there. Because now we're almost 2 hours, or just about 2 hours, into this active shooting situation. And all you have to do is look on the right side of your screen to understand that this is still going on. Hundreds of police vehicles are out there, and it's all because of shots that started firing, because of some sort of narcotics operation that was taking place just before 5 o'clock. We have some police dispatch that we want to share with you that provides just a little insight into just how intense and chaotic the moments were when these shots broke out for these police officers. Listen.
Got you. Officers at 3916 5. We'll be transporting the shot officer to Temple. Actually, transmission. Transit police has the shot officer. 3916 is on the transport. Follow over radio. 15 for Butler, stationary radio.
All right, could it be?
Don't know.
All right.
It's going to be my target location radio for staging area. Be advised, we're still pinned down inside this location, available inside the kitchen, shooting upwards and forward into the opposition of the police.
All right, use caution. Okay.
So to just imagine 6 police officers shot by at least one gunman inside the home where police are dedicating their attention right now in that neighborhood. At least one police officer is trapped inside that home, according to sources to NBC 10. So you can just imagine how intense